I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker. Sarain Fox is a Canadian Anishinaabe activist, broadcaster, and filmmaker. A storyteller at heart, she amplifies the voices of her people in hopes of creating meaningful dialogue between Indigenous and settler communities. Sarain has built her career at the cross-section of activism and media. In 2020, she founded Land Back Studios, a production company focused on authentic storytelling in new media, television, and film. She's most noted for her 2020 documentary film Inende, which currently runs on CBC's Gem, for which she received a Canadian Screen Award nomination for Best Host Interviewer in a news or information program. You've seen Sarain in the larger-than-life billboards and videos for Sephora's We Belong to Something Beautiful initiative, or as the host for APTN's Future History and Viceland's Rise. As an Indigenous entrepreneur, Amex Canada partnered with Sarain for the launch of their Blueprint campaign to support BIPOC businesses. Sarain uses her platform to celebrate the immense knowledge and talent of Indigenous people, designers, and brands. She's lent her voice to international brands such as Sephora, Canada Goose, Nike N7, and Manitoba Mucklucks, where she sees each partnership as an opportunity to highlight her culture in the mainstream, share the stage with up-and-coming Indigenous talent, and change the world for her people. She's here today to discuss community first, rebuilding trust, and reconnecting to purpose. Please join me in welcoming Sarain Fox. Welcome, Sarain.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here virtually with all of you today. And so the way that I first begin is to introduce myself traditionally, and it goes like this. Bojo, Waban and Ongo Kwe and Desnikas, Wabazeshi and Dodem, Anishinaabe Kwe and Dao, Bachuana and Donjiban, Niso, Medalion. So all of that is my introduction. In there, it talks about my name, where I'm from, but most importantly, the community that I'm responsible to. So I'm from Bachuana First Nation, and I'm Martin Clan. And if you don't know where that is, if you might not have heard the traditional name, it's on the shores of Lake Superior in Northern Ontario, Canada. But I'm known as Sarain Fox. It's so important for me to start there with my introduction. And as you notice, sometimes I even get bubbly just saying it because my introduction in that traditional way holds my truth. And I wasn't always, I don't know if I can say it allowed, but it wasn't always acceptable for me to introduce myself like that. And I didn't always feel safe doing it. So now when I get the opportunity to use my language, to speak my truth, and to introduce myself and set myself in place and in purpose right off the start, I do, because I think it's a revolutionary act. So I'm a storyteller. I found my way to calling myself just a storyteller because, well, you heard the introduction. It's sometimes really hard to find a way to just say who you are. And so when I call myself a storyteller and all the work that I do storytelling, I connect myself to my ancestors. And that's really important because it puts me on a path where I can walk in my truth. So I'm going to start with a story. Like many of you, just over 2 years ago now, life stopped. I was going at an incredible pace. I was in this moment in my career where I was just running. There were so many amazing opportunities. And I felt like I was really honing in on my practice and finding my voice and a way to uplift the voices of my people. I really felt like I was making an impact. And in 1 week, really, everything that I had planned for the next 2 years, everything that I thought that I was looking forward to, everything that I had been building, so many things just stopped. And I know we all felt that. Some of us didn't lose our jobs right away. Some of us may have continued in some kind of normal, but no matter who you are or what you were involved in, there was something in the universe that was different. People were asked to stay home. People were asked to isolate. People were asked to be in their homes, some of them for the first time in a very long time. And for me as an Indigenous person, something else started to happen. It wasn't just our homes that started to close. It wasn't just the jobs that disappeared, but our entire communities shut down. And when I mean shut down, I mean roadblocks at the entrances, health checks to make sure that we could keep our people safe. See, for me and my people, this isn't our first pandemic. And we have an interesting perspective on what it means to live through a pandemic. So, yes, change. Yes, fear. So many big things happening in the world that we had to take notice of. So in that first month, well, I want to be really transparent. It wasn't right away. I had to sit in that feeling and that discomfort and that unknowing what was coming for a few weeks, maybe even a month. And in witnessing what was happening to the world, I knew that I had to continue to do my work. I knew that I had to continue to find stories, because that's the only way that I know to connect to truth. And I come from a people whose voices, our dances, our culture, our ceremony has been silenced for so long. In fact, it wasn't that long ago that it was actually illegal for me to dance in this very country. Illegal for me to leave my community in more than just 3 people. And so all of these things that were happening all around, they didn't just feel new and dangerous. They actually felt tied to something that maybe I hadn't lived before, but it felt like it was in my bones, in my blood memory. And so with that feeling, that rawness of fear and discomfort and disappointment, I started to do the only thing I've always known how to do: reconnect, reach out, look out into my community, go to my elders, seek wisdom and guidance from outside of myself, from my community. And so there was an amazing opportunity. I think that the one beautiful thing that happened, or there's lots of beautiful things, but one of the beautiful things that happened is we started to support our artists. There were grants and all kinds of ways that we reached out to one another and said, how can we create? Do you remember? Sometimes it's hard to remember the first couple months of the pandemic. That's when everyone started to learn new things, learn Zoom, reach out to one another virtually, find hope in darkness. And so I set out to do the same. And I went up to my community. I was one of the first Canadian filmmakers who was legally allowed to go out and set out on a filming adventure. Adventure is definitely the word I'm going to use, because we didn't know. We didn't know if going out in a pandemic was going to be something that provided, I don't know, some hope in the darkness, like I was saying, or if we were going to bring harm to the communities, if we were going to bring harm just by trying to go and film. But we did it anyways, and we followed every single precaution we could so that we could keep my community, and most importantly, the oldest matriarch in my family, my Auntie Mary, safe. Now, I had been wanting to tell a story of my Auntie Mary for a really long time, but the pandemic even made it more necessary, more urgent to go and speak with her. My Auntie Mary Hill is a residential school survivor. In fact, she worked in the trenches of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission at the very beginning of their work. And she helped to reach out to survivors and find ways to connect them with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and make sure that their stories were heard. My Auntie Mary has been a part of helping other people's stories be heard and shared for so long. And it was vital to me to listen to her. And I didn't know it at the time, but all of this was going to play out while I was expecting my first child. And so there was even more sense of urgency to listen and to record and to be present to my community, to all of those around me who, I think pre-pandemic, the world had been moving so fast that sometimes we had forgotten to slow down and listen, especially to our elders. And so that's another beautiful thing that I always want us to remember. Do you remember the moment in the pandemic where the entire world started to remember their elders. This is so important because for me as an Indigenous woman, this has been such a central place for me all my life, that elders are the holders of deep wisdom and knowledge. They hold our culture, our tradition, and all of the things that we not only fought to cultivate and hold on to, but they hold the key to what we want to pass on, the future that we imagine for all of us. And for me as a new mom, the future I want to build and be a part of for my daughter, and for all of the 7 generations who we know are coming up behind us. In fact, what I just mentioned is part of a prophecy. It's called the 8th fire prophecy. And this prophecy informs so much of my ideology as an Indigenous person, as an Anishinaabe woman. The prophecies speak of our roles and responsibilities. They speak about how we are to take care of one another. And in that, it says that every single decision we make, we must consider 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So I did this. I went to my community. I was terrified during the restrictions. I got to be a filmmaker in a new way of working. And that really helped. It really, really helped me connect with what my work was going to look like moving forward, how I was going to continue sharing stories, lifting up stories, reclaiming my identity, not only for myself, but for all of those young people who may be looking up to me. And I'm really happy I got to go back to my community in that moment, because there are so many amazing things that happened in the first year of the pandemic. So many children had to stay home, right? And I'm going to say that like that. I get hesitant because I know as parents, there was so much adjusting. There were so many new ideas that we were supposed to just jump onto. And there were so many ways in which our lives got turned upside down. But from the outside looking in, I witnessed incredible movement. As an activist, I've been fighting for our land, for the protection of our land, our waters and communities all my life. And what I witnessed during the pandemic was a return to the land. I saw it most in my community, but there's no way that you can deny it happened all over the world, in Canada and abroad, a return to the land. Last year, this time, I watched entire communities return to the sugar bush to help maple syrup flow. I watched entire communities learn how to make maple syrup for the first time. I watched harvesting happen, storytelling on the land, broadcast virtually. I saw elders connect with young people. I heard stories shared that I had never heard before. It's as though the universe asked us to slow down just long enough to hear one another, to hear each other's stories, and through our stories came truth. Now, while all of this was happening, there was this bubbling always underneath the surface. I mean, we can't deny it. Right before the pandemic, we saw Indigenous land defenders shut down Canada. We saw people standing up for water. We saw young people shutting down their schools every Friday. There was conversations happening in the mainstream that I had never seen happen like that. Truth was being lifted up. So first, we were asked to slow down, to connect with one another. And then next, we were asked to bear witness to each other's truth. And that truth isn't always easy to hear. I can tell you that hearing truth is one of the most difficult things that you can do as a human, to sit and witness, or to sit and just be witness to someone else's experience is one of the most powerful and profound human exchanges that you can offer. It's that very reason why I use that introduction, why I speak my language, why it's important for me to claim that I am a land defender, to talk about stories and elders, and to talk about silencing, because truth unlocks the silence. Truth allows us to listen. And in the speaking and raising up of our own truth, we can truly connect to those around us. We can truly connect and make a community that fosters a way forward for all of us, that is different, that includes all of us. And I think that's the real spirit of reconciliation. And I use that word lightly because it is truth before reconciliation. We must talk about truth first. And so what was so revolutionary about all of this slowing down that caused us to rise up also? I think that there's this unearthing of this discomfort that we're all sitting in, right? It's not enough to just listen. Now it's time to raise our voices too. There's so much injustice happening all around us. It's not just happening to one group. It's not just happening to one city. It's not just happening to one country. There is injustice happening all over the world. And none of us can stay neutral about it anymore. We must speak up and find our own truth within everything that is happening around the world. And that's where I draw to my own people and the way that we were able to stand up for the survival of our stories, stand up for the survival of our communities. And that meant returning to what we have always known. In turmoil, in darkness, in hard times, we have to return to what we know. And so here's my question to all of you. What is it that you know? What is it that connects you to hope, to your own hope and purpose for what you desire to change and make impact? What is the impact you want to make? What is the world that you want to live in, and how do you want to change it? If you don't know those things, whether it's your home life, your work, your business, if you don't know what your purpose and the way that your purpose creates impact is, then you're not ready to raise your voice. Still, you are searching and seeking, connecting with your truth. And for me, in this pandemic, in this moment, in this complete transformation of our world that we are in right now, it is the complete access to our own truth and the uplifting of each other's truth in our community that will propel us forward, that will allow us to trust one another. Because for far too long, we have allowed one truth to lead us, one ideology, one way. And what I want to offer is the idea that all of us collectively contribute to the fabric that weaves together our stories and allows us to not be a wildfire, but a slow burn that can light the way for all of us together into a new future that we all built, a future that I want to be a part of, one filled with justice and diversity and kindness, one fostered and founded on truth, and in that way, on connection. So Chimigwech, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and an honor to share. I love this opportunity. So Miigwech for all of you who have joined us. And I think we have an amazing opportunity right now to have a conversation. So I'll invite Teresa back and yeah, we'll jump into it. I'm excited.
Thank you, Sarain. As always, such a passionate and inspiring approach to the messaging that you have, and a truly authentic way that you connect with all of us. So thank you for that. And you can see, I think, for our audience, just how and why Sarain resonates so well with some of our clients that are looking for speakers for environmental topics and equity, diversity, and inclusion, and International Women's Day. We've been really fortunate to bring you to a number of those types of events, Sarain, and your message is so powerful. I see some questions. Yes, I see some questions coming in. So I will run those over with you. We have a note from Cliff. First of all, a compliment. Thank you so much for your story. It's clear you're passionate and engaged and a vibrant storyteller. So appreciated. The question is about how would you see a cultural shift in the Western/global North cultures? And more depth to that, that have developed an individualistic, near-term focused, selfish or entitled vantage to something longer term. But for you, how is that in line with what you conceive that has moved you so much?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I think, I have to shout out my mom here because I was raised in a way to really understand that I is we, and I think that that can be really cheesy, but literally in my language, there's no word for I. It doesn't exist. The only singular word is Anishinaabe, which means the people. So even when you refer to yourself as one of the people. And I think that it's true. We have been moving in, in the wrong direction, I think, for a really long time. And I think right now what we're seeing is a lot of consumer pressure actually to change that. We're seeing that happen, whether it's in the products, just what's available and what people are searching for, in the way that we stand up for our money, like where we spend it, and how we are concerned about protecting the environment, protecting our communities. And it goes beyond just environmental. We're wondering even further, like, how does this product impact the community where it's from, where it's made? And so you can really go down that, and we can really break it down. But I think right now what's happening is a culture shift. I think social media has really amplified the singular identity, and I'm even in it. I'm in the middle of it, unraveling it for myself. It's like, how do we make sure that we can use and harness social media to create impact for all of us, not just for one of us, not one voice, but community focus, even projects that allow all of us to be heard and seen and protected. So I think we're just in the middle of it. I think, like anything, the pendulum has to swing all the way for us to find balance. And I think Indigenous people are really seeing that, because we have to protect our communities. We don't have the benefit of even having enough numbers to not protect the communities. Some of our communities that were under lockdown during the pandemic, some of them in one community held the last final speakers of a dialect. So you think of an outbreak in one community where you lose all of those elders and you no longer have a connection to that language. That's how vital and how scary it is for so many of my people. So I think when you're in that kind of place, it makes it a little bit easier to say, okay, we're in this together.
Thank you so much for that. As you say, the power of supporting each other and being together. And earlier when you were speaking about the importance of the choices that we all make that make a statement. There is another question about differing views. So what's your advice on connecting and communicating with people who have different views than you?
Yeah, so I think that's in that piece. I think listening to somebody else's truth, their story, is so important. You don't have to resonate with everything that someone else is saying to offer them kindness, to offer them just the opportunity to be heard. I think that a lot of times, especially as a journalist, one of the hardest things that I always have to remind myself is that I don't want to walk into a room of people who are already on my side, because then that would be easy. I want to walk into a room of people who have a completely different view than me, a completely different worldview, ideology, and still be able to bring them in, still be able to say something that resonates with them. And I think that's where we really find the idea of peace. How do we find peace? We find peace by seeing the humanity in one another And that is so difficult, to find the humanity in someone who you could easily say is your enemy, right? Or somebody you don't believe in, right? You don't believe in what they're saying. You don't believe in their truth. But just to listen and bear witness allows you the opportunity to also gain something too, right? Because if you really don't agree with them, if you listen, then maybe you can break something down and have either a better place to stand the next time you go into that conversation. You'll be more educated, more prepared, or you'll find something that you can agree on that makes, especially in work, it makes the environment that you're in tolerable. And sometimes that can blossom into something more beautiful. I think we're going to have to find ways, especially with social media, we can't just have private views anymore. You might have a best friend that has a completely different worldview than you, and you might have not known until social media, right? And so all of a sudden you might think that you're standing one place with someone, but you're actually standing another. I think it's more valuable if you know exactly where you're coming from and how you're going to connect. So yeah, this is a really hard one. It's really, really hard. And I think that you just have to be able to sit in that discomfort and find the humanity.
Beautifully said, Sarain. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions. Someone asks, you're such a positive force. Do you ever get discouraged or less hopeful? And how do you get back to the positive?
All the time. I mean, I think I'm really lucky because I'm pretty bubbly. It's really hard to like tone that down, but no, all the time. And I think it's the opportunity to share and to talk about hope and to continue cultivating hope that literally makes it possible for me to continue working, continue using my voice. Because right now, like even as we're all online right now, there are more children being discovered, unmarked graves. There's so much in the media all the time that forces me to realize that every step I make forward, I have to go and undo or re-educate. There's so much work all the time. And so, yeah, there is a real place of helplessness that you can go to. And so for me, the only way to keep myself from being frozen is to stay in motion and to continue to do the work, to keep finding that light and to keep finding the people around me who fuel me, the partnerships that fuel me, and to continue to share. I think that there's so much we can learn from each other. And yeah, that's what fuels me. So this morning, if there was anything on the news that made me feel like we needed to get up and work harder, then this exchange with all of you is going to be the fuel for tomorrow. So
fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarain. And miigwech to you and to our audience for joining us. I'm trying. And
that was awesome.
Good. And just so much about your willingness to be an active voice for so many communities and representing us so well in Canada and helping us all to rebuild trust amongst each other and see our way forward. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. And thank to all of you for tuning in.